Today on the podcast, I have Susan Friedman. Susan, welcome back to the show.
Oh, Kevin, it's always a pleasure to be with you.
Do you recall when you were last on the show? If you had to guess,
I don't. Is
I
that a mark against me starting out?
not in the least. It speaks to how long you and I have been doing this thing. Because I went and I looked up your last episode 10 years ago. A decade
OMG.
ago, you were a guest on this podcast, and we were talking all things book marketing. And here we are 10 years later, and you and I are both still podcasting and both still working with authors and helping them to succeed.
Oh my goodness, that's unbelievable. Well, kudos to you for doing that. And I have to say it to me too, because 10 years of podcasting, as you know, I think the average is about 6 months for people to keep a podcast going. So 10 years is pretty awesome.
Well, and you have more than twice as many episodes as me. I'm in
Oh,
the
okay.
early 220s. You are over 500 episodes.
Yes, in fact, this week is going to be 533.
Amazing.
It
So
is.
looking back over 500 episodes of talking to people about book marketing, this is a two-part question. One, what are your big takeaways or what have you learned about book marketing over those conversations? But two, also, what have you learned about podcasting, having interviewed 500 people and released, 500 episodes?
Yeah, yeah. So what I've learned about book marketing, Kevin, is, there's not just one way to do this. And as you know, and this is something we both advocate, there are many different ways to do something to get the result. What I found with so many authors, if they don't want to do it or they're fearful of it, don't do it.
Mm.
At least in the beginning, you know? There's just something about the whole marketing thing that people are like, oh, I don't want to market my book. Can you do it for me? No.
And neither will their publisher these days.
No, nobody's going to do it for them in the same way they are. I mean, you've published multiple books. I've published multiple books. And these are our babies. And we've got to nurture them. And the more that we do, the better off it's going to be out there in the marketplace. Nobody is going to feel the same emotional pull about your book as you do. So, yes.
I've got a question for you about book marketing from the perspective of a small business person, because you primarily advise and work with folks who are nonfiction authors. So a lot of the time they're using their nonfiction book to develop their platform or to become an expert or prove their expertise or share their knowledge, all those sorts of things. Um, I'm in a position right now where I'm tomorrow launching a fiction book. And I'm marketing it and doing what I can. But every time I sit down to do a little marketing on it, I go, I could be marketing a $2,000 coaching program right now. And instead, I'm going to market a book that I make a $2 profit on probably at the end of the day. So, what would your advice be to someone like me who says, I have these way higher profit margin things that I could be marketing? What's the value of me putting my time and effort into marketing a low profit product like a book?
So, and that's an excellent question. And it comes up more, almost every time with authors, is the fact that what do you want your book to do for you is the basis of it. You want to give your book a role. And what role does it play? Is it center stage? And if it's center stage, then obviously what you're doing is putting all the energy into it, um, for very little return. However, with a nonfiction book, particularly, it's harder. Marketing fiction is very different to marketing nonfiction. Just it really is that they're two separate animals. But when it comes to fiction, it's really what do you want that book to do for you? If you want it to build your authority, your expertise, as you mentioned earlier, then you've got to look at how best can you do this. You're not in the business of selling books. As you said, am I selling a book for $2 or could I be selling a $2,000 coaching program? You know, if your goal is to sell the $2,000 coaching program, then that's where your focus is. And the book comes along for a ride. It gives you credibility. Hey, Kevin Johns is, he's an expert in this area. And that's your sort of almost like a passport to credibility in that area. And that particularly is important for nonfiction authors, especially so many of my authors want to get into speaking. They want
Hmm.
speaking gigs. And in order to do that, these days, there's an expectation that you have a book. If you're getting up on a platform and talking and sharing your expertise, there's just like, okay, you wrote the book on it, didn't you? Oh, yes, here it is.
How do you help? Oh, sorry. Were you the?
No, no, no. I mean, does that answer the question?
I
Does that
think
help?
so, and it makes me wonder. I have nonfiction authors come to me sometimes and they have a collection of 50 ideas and 300 pages that they call it a book. But there's no clear through line. There's not really one strong hook or message that's being delivered. And so I work with them to help find that. But I'm guessing not everyone's coming to me before they come to you. So, what do you say when someone comes to you and they have so many ideas and so much expertise, but don't necessarily yet have a hook or an angle?
So, and that happens a lot, as you know. I mean, it's really getting that focus and going back to what do you want the book to do for you and who is your target market?
Mm.
Because if you're saying, well, my book is for everyone, you can't sell it to everyone. I mean, not even the greats of the greats, the Procter and Gambles of this world, the Microsofts, the Nikes, they're not selling to everyone. They've got their divisions and they know exactly who they want to market a certain product to or service. Well, the same applies to us. I mean, that's marketing. So you really have to know, what do you want it to do? What's the end result? Because then you can, charter a path to get there. Otherwise, like, oh, there's a big shiny object over there. I like that one. Or let's go over here and look at this one, which happens all the time. And there's a shiny object, almost every single day. And yes, oh, this one is going to do it. This is the ultimate. This isn't, but that's not the case. There is no silver bullet that's going to get us there, other than the fact of us having is it a dream? Is it, a real goal that you want to achieve? Do you want to affect 1,000 people or 10,000 or 1,000,000 people in a certain area? Well, if that is your goal, then, what's the first step to get there? Or, you start going backwards and re-engineer what that's going to look like. But you've got to stay the course. Marketing is a long game, Kevin, as you know. This is not something, oh, I'm going to do an ad and boom, I'm going to sell hundreds of thousands of copies of the book. Um, yeah, you might sell some, but you're not in the business of selling books.
I launched my first book marketing program this year. This is something I was always nervous about. I really feel like my area of expertise is in prose and coaching and editing, but I also have built a decent business over the last decade, and I know a thing or two, I think, about how to sell a product and sell a product online in the modern day and whatnot. Um, but what I find so interesting, and I'm curious, well, I think maybe I know why this is, but I'm curious what your take on it is. I find so often people would rather spend 8 hours creating and scheduling Facebook posts that barely anyone's ever going to see, as opposed to like picking up the phone and calling like 10 people that like actually might move the needle. Why do we think social media is going to be the cure all, and why are we so afraid of talking to other people and talking about our book to real other people in the world?
Yeah, I think it goes back to this idea of people don't like to feel as if they're this pushy salesperson.
Hmm.
And for them to pick up a phone or, to send an email and follow up, and that sounds like, oh, there's something scary. There's this fear of rejection. There's very much this fear of rejection in that. Whereas Facebook almost puts a partition. You don't know who's going to look at that ad and might respond to it or not. So it's sort of this third party that you're hiding behind, and you're thinking, oh, yes, it's going to do everything for me. It's not. Facebook doesn't care, you know, about you. Amazon doesn't care about you. You know, there's these 800-pound gorillas, and they're not interested in your particular book or your particular ad. So it's really up to the author to do their due diligence, to really raise this baby in the way that they want to, and to see it grow up as this strapping, young male, female. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just like a parent, taking care of their kids. They want the best for their kids. But in order to do that, they have to do things that may be somewhat uncomfortable.
Which is interesting because I think one might assume a lot of the stuff for authors goes on in the writing phase. Oh, my book's not good, or I'm not good enough. I'm never going to be able to do this. And you would think, oh, the book's done. I've proven I can do it. Now it's just about tactics and execution. But it sounds like book marketing is as psychological as any other aspect
Oh
of the
my
book
goodness,
creation.
that imposter syndrome comes out, if it existed when you started writing the book, it just gains in, strength as the book comes out, because then you've actually got something and you're like, OMG, and you're fearful of criticism, you're fearful of judgment, you're fearful of being, as I said, that so-called salesperson. Um, yeah, but you got to do what you enjoy doing. You and I enjoy doing podcasts. That's one way, not the only way, but it's one way for you and I to get our name out, what we do. Yeah, writing articles. I'm very big on Substack at the moment. I love Substack. And yeah, it was Medium before, then it was LinkedIn. I mean, it's another platform. And is it the be all end all? No. It's just another tool, as AI is a tool, and for us to use it appropriately. I
This
don't know if that answered your question, but yeah.
Absolutely. Well, this is something I learned teaching marketing for the first time. Was I think people assume you're supposed to do everything and exactly what the teacher says. And as you said, podcasting happens to be the method I like to spread word about my services or my books or whatever. And so I always go to it as the example when I'm talking to people. I'll be, so you want to send your outreach email so you can get on that podcast. And then people kept having to be like, does it have to be a podcast? I'm like, no, not at all. I'm using that as my example, but maybe you like writing articles. Maybe you like attending live events. Maybe you like YouTube. Whatever that thing is that resonates for you. Because as you said at the beginning, if you don't like doing it,
You're
you're
not
not
going to do it.
do it. Exactly.
No, you'll go kicking and screaming, and you're not bringing the right energy to this.
Mm.
You've got to do what you love doing. I love interviewing people. I love this environment. I actually don't do video at all. I know you do video and many others do. I like my sort of NPR, the National Public Radio. Uh, that's how I like to do it. But, you know, the main thing is you're getting out the information that will be helpful to your target audience. And for me, if once you and I are going to have an interview in a few days' time, and what I want from our interview is that our listeners will take away at least one thing that they can put into practice. And if they can do that, I feel the episode has been successful.
Absolutely. And I find too, so often the people who I'm working with in the writing but and marketing space, it's not like they just came out from under a rock. They've heard these things, they know the techniques, they know the terms, but are they implementing them? Right. And sometimes just hearing someone talk about something on a podcast, oh yeah, I should really be focusing on the platforms that I enjoy. Right. Even if they just hear that, they're like, I know that, but hearing Susan and Kevin talk about it reminds me of it. It brings it to the fore, and maybe I now go and take some action on it. And so
Yeah, yeah.
that's what I think the value, and that's why both of us, I think you and I, can talk about this stuff forever, is because even if it's never redundant, because even the most basic first principles, I always get something out of revisiting them. Every time I teach something, I go, oh yeah, I should be thinking about that more.
Well, marketing is a very inexact science, which is
Mm,
tough for anybody who's an analytic. A plus B will not always equal C. It might equal C one day, D the next, and E the next. There are so many factors that get drawn into marketing, the day of the week, the time of the year, what else is happening in the world? I mean, all affects marketing in different ways. So, but we can't always, stay on top of everything, and but just have a clear path, try one thing, try it and keep going with it. I mean, podcasting, it's taken me several years, and I'm sure you too, to get any kind of recognition for the podcast and to build the audience, the listenership that we both have from our podcasts. That didn't happen overnight. Yeah. So it took time, it took perseverance, where there's some tougher times, absolutely. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I just love this medium. I just love it. And I know you do too. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing it.
absolutely.
So,
I
yes.
mean, sometimes it feels like the podcast is an excuse to get to meet and talk to cool people. You're
Yeah.
busy, I'm busy. We like each other, but it's not like we'd be sitting down and talking for half an hour if we didn't have the podcast. And so, as much, I mean, I think it's kind of like art, where I try to create books that I would like. And so for the podcast, I try to talk to people who I would like, and ideally listeners get something out of it. But I think I'm almost more me focused than I am listener focused, where I believe that if you and I resonate and have good energy and go deep on a topic, I'm confident they will like it, because I like it.
Yeah. Well, and it's your passion
Hmm.
that is contagious.
Hmm.
And that's the same with your book. If you are passionate about your book and the way you talk about your book, and you've got that passion and that's going to get people excited and say, huh, tell me more. Where can I get a copy? Yeah. So, but that comes from you. The book's not going to do it. The book is a static object. It's not going to do anything unless you help it.
Well, you mentioned earlier, if you're doing things to market that you don't like, you're going to bring the wrong energy to it. And it sounds like you've kind of defined that energy now as passion. Is that what you mean?
Oh, totally,
Mm.
totally. I hear many times my first interaction with an author is over the phone. And I hear from the get-go how they feel about that book. If they're a little down and they're just talking to me like this, I'm like, oh my goodness. They just did this as an exercise. It's lacking heart, it's lacking passion. We've got to infuse that, and then we're going to get people excited. Yeah. Obviously, there's an approach. It's not, but the fact is, you've got to feel excited about the book because if you don't, why should anybody else?
I used to play a lot of men's league hockey and I was a goalie. And so like every goal that went in was like a knife to my chest. I just felt everyone. And we had this one game where we just got destroyed. We lost 9-0 or something. I was ready to jump off a cliff. And we go into the locker room afterwards and I sit down next to my teammate and I go, "That might have been the worst game we've ever played." And he looks at me, he goes, "Yeah, I think you're right. I was pretty good though." It's like if I had the littlest amount of his level of confidence, I would be doing so great. But I
Yeah,
always think about that. This guy who can lose 9-0 and go, well, at least I had a good game. I felt like I was moving good out there on the ice. And I think that's the energy we need to bring to our books and our book marketing.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, are you going to strike gold every single time? No. You know, you'll get some people who are interested and others not. I mean, you know that I sold 500,000 copies of my first book to one company. That started with a conversation.
Not a
And
post.
it probably took about 2 years before that actually came to fruition.
Mm,
We were talking about different ideas about the book and what would work for what they wanted to do with the book. But I actually didn't even go in with any kind of, figure in mind. I just was wanting them to have this book for their clients, their customers. And when they ordered, they did 250,000 once and then they did another 250,000 because it was so successful and translated it into 5 languages. But they had a specific role for the book. They used the book as a lead magnet, and they would, in the olden days when they sent out postcards for lead magnets, and that you filled in the postcard and sent it back, then a distributor would get that lead, and when they came and visited the prospect, they would give them a copy of the book. So it was like, hey, I've got this gift for you, and now let me show you the product. So I always say that they sold the hardware and I sold the software.
let's really nerd out here now on some marketing stuff. So obviously what you're talking about there is direct response marketing, the old days, sending out a piece of paper, a sales letter, this sort of thing to catch people's attention. Whereas these days you hear a lot about influencer marketing, social media marketing. Where do you kind of land in between all of that? Because I know your approach isn't necessarily go become a star on Instagram, but obviously I don't know, you're probably not mailing out postcards or whatnot these days. So, in a world where maybe influencer marketing is one end and direct response is the other, where do you land in your preferred approach to things?
Well, that's an interesting question. I would love to be further along towards the influencer, even though I'm not going to be going on TikTok or Instagram and, I am putting out information. I'm putting out, hopefully, helpful information and ways that people can do things differently. That's why I like Substack so much too, because I write an article, I write one that's for free, and then there's a paid version
Okay.
as well, so that you can become a subscriber
Hmm.
to that. Um, I think it's just a constant, you've got to stay in the public eye
Hmm.
and have your target audience. Now, I may be known in the nonfiction arena and even a smaller area of that nonfiction arena. And that's fine. I don't care if somebody outside the arena doesn't know me. Yeah. This was like when I was in the trade show industry, which I was in for 25 years, and that's where I wrote many of my books. I was considered a quasi-celebrity in that environment. Um, Anybody outside that environment didn't know me, but people inside that environment did know me. And that to me was important,
Mm.
you know, because those were my clients, those were my customers, those were people I was interested or could be interested in. Um, so it's narrowing that focus. You know, we talked to, I started, I think, the sentence about, so many authors think their book is for everyone, and you can't do that. So when you look at how can you niche it down, how can you find a group of people that you can get your arms around? Like, I have people who say, well, my book is for women. Okay. Professional women. Okay. Between 30 and 60. And I said, well, you know what? A woman of 30 and a woman of 60 have very different interests. One's just starting, thinking about maybe having a family or, starting their life, their profession, whereas the 60-year-old is looking at, huh, we've got empty nesters. We might even be looking at the retirement side of things. So you really want to look at who specifically your book is for. And more often than not, it's number one, somebody very similar to you. Because, you're sharing your expertise, you're sharing your experience, um, also your background.
Mm.
People say, well, what kind of niche? And I I had this colleague many years ago, and she was an RN. She was burnt out and she left, the healthcare environment. And she said, I want to be a humorist, but I don't know who to, be a humorist for. And I was like, how about other burnt out or, ready to be burnt out nurses? Um, and she's like, I don't want to go back into that environment. I was like, but they know you. You've got credibility. You're one of them. You're not doing the work that you used to be doing. You're now giving them a way of how can they, avoid burnout? How can they, get on with their lives and feel good about it? Um, and then all of a sudden it's like, ding, ding. Yes. It then looks attractive if you're coming in a different costume, playing a different role for them. So that's often the case. It isn't 100%, um, but it's really knowing who is going to buy your book, who's going to hire you, and what for. Yeah? Do you want to do training? Do you want to be doing keynote speaking? What do you want to be doing? Yeah? So getting that clarity is so important.
Taking it back to that micro celebrity idea, it's funny. Some I had a client who was a successful radio and podcast host for women's music. So she had a big list for people who were into female artists. And then she kind of stopped doing that and worked with me and wrote a book. And the book was out, and she tried to reach out to that list to see if people would jump over to her. And not much happened because they were interested in women music, not a novel that she was writing about. And so obviously I'm familiar with this experience. And yet, like just this week, Kimberly Grabus, do you know Kimberly? She's a
Mm.
Canadian book marketer. Um, and she's a friend of mine, and I was complaining to her about how my pre-orders are going. And she was like, it's so funny because she put it in all capitals. She was like, Kevin, you're, and then she put it in all caps, a pretty big deal as a writing coach. But no one knows you for your authorship, right? Like, why would you expect for your pre-order numbers to be bonkers when you never promote your books, right? And I'm like, Of course, I know
Yeah,
this. I know this. But it's interesting that you really can be, a celebrity in your little area, and be very successful doing. But
absolutely.
you also need to remember that does not translate over to other things, right? Just because someone might know me as a writing coach or have had success working with me as a writing coach doesn't mean they want to read my fiction novel, right? So
Not
it's
at
a
all.
great reminder from Kimberly to just be like, Kevin, you're a pretty big deal in some spaces, but not in the one that you're currently marketing. So don't be surprised by the results you're getting. I was like, thank you. Sometimes it's good we need someone else to point out the obvious for us.
Yes, yes, we do. We do. Yes. The blinding, what is it? The blinding something of the obvious.
Right. When you see book people marketing their book, are there major mistakes that are always being repeated, or are people finding new ways constantly to make mistakes?
I think they often get wrapped up in that same scenario. I think people, for the most part, are constantly looking, and I've fallen into this trap too.
Hmm.
It's how can I do it quicker?
Ah.
Yeah. So that's where the shiny object syndrome comes in.
Mm.
And you see somebody being so successful in an area and you're like, oh, I want to be like them, so let me buy this product because if I buy this product, then I'm going to be like that. And again, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen because you don't know the backstory of how long it took for that person to be successful. I had a mentor once who said it takes 15 years to become an overnight success.
Mm. Yeah.
You ask any actor about their journey, and it's their, uphills, blocks. It's not hunky-dory. It's not that they walked in one day and were offered this incredible role in a movie or in a show. Yeah, it just doesn't happen that way. Or if it does, that success might be a one success wonder.
Hmm.
And then you sort of go backwards. But more often it's that it just takes time. And that's why I say marketing's a long game. I had one author say to me, how long do I have to keep marketing my book? And I was like, how long do you want to keep selling it?
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
know, if you stop marketing, nobody hears about it. But you've got to be front and center to your target audience
Hmm.
all the time, whether it's podcasts, whether you're as a host or as a guest, writing articles, being on social media. There's not one platform that says, oh, if I only do this, then it's going to happen.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because I call it the dripping faucet. You've got this tap that's dripping all the time. And if it's dripping, the bathtub is going to fill up.
Yeah.
And those drips are an article, a podcast interview, you know, a course you do, it something. As long as you're doing something all the time.
Jenny Blake, she's author of Pivot and some other books that you might be familiar with, but something she said to me once is when I write my nonfiction book, I am ready to talk about that topic for the next 5 years. That's the
Mhm.
window she gives. She says, I put out a nonfiction book and then I teach and I speak and I do around that topic for 5 years. And so when I'm working with nonfiction people, I'm thinking, if you're not ready to talk about this topic for the next 5 years, you shouldn't be writing a book on it. And
Absolutely. I love that.
yeah, and with fiction authors, I think the cycle is shorter, especially given traditional publishing, they're looking for maybe a book a year, right? But even there, I say to my clients, you're not going to do a launch week push and then move on. It's like I would say as a novelist, you want to be promoting that book for at least a year before you move on to the next thing.
And what's lovely about fiction is that if people like you, they're going to buy more of you. You don't have that quite in the same way with nonfiction Because as you said, you've got this subject matter that is huge and you can talk about it for 5 years. A fiction book, it's a story. And is this a genre that I'm interested in? Is this something, I love murder mystery.
Mm,
Anthony Horowitz, he's a brilliant writer. And I listened to one book. I listen to books. Um, I listen to one book and I'm like, OMG, and I start looking for more. And then I've got a library now of, I don't know, half a dozen or more of his books because I liked him. So I love his writing and I like the narration,
mm,
but I just want more of that.
hmm.
So that's the difference for, fiction authors,
Right.
which is wonderful, but you've got to get people who love what you write about.
And you also have to write multiple books. You can't
And you have to write
put a
multiple
single
books.
novel out and think you're going to build a career around.
Oh, absolutely. I think there's that famous story, Gone Girl, and I think this was her third or fourth book.
Yeah, well,
Um,
Susan Collins in the Hunger Games. She had
yeah,
an entire other trilogy long
yeah.
before Hunger Games came along.
Yeah,
You've got
yeah.
well,
So it's not the first time, but you just have to keep going. I think there's more dedication as a fiction writer because you've got to keep writing.
mm,
This is your profession,
yeah.
is writing and coming up with, you know, novel ideas for stories, um, which is a little different again, as I said, for nonfiction, because for nonfiction, many of my authors are looking at corporate, for instance, to
Yeah.
buy their book and to use it in a training program.
Mhm.
Now, are there new ways of doing, let's say, a method, or can they improve on something? Yes, but you're selling often a system, a method of doing something that you've created that works, which is, again, that whole concept is very different. That's why I say marketing fiction and marketing nonfiction is like psh, two animals.
Indeed, but at the same time, at the end of the day, whether you're selling a car or selling a book to a novel to a reader or a book to a corporation, a lot of those fundamentals and principles, which are the long-term things that you and I teach, they do cross over, right? Like,
Oh, yes, there's
like,
definitely an element of stuff that does cross over.
yeah.
I think in the marketing is slightly different in terms of how you approach. I think fiction does lend itself more to, maybe social media,
Mm,
um, talking about the characters and getting people excited. I had a young lady who wrote a fiction book so that she could get into university.
interesting.
And she got into the best school, and that's exactly what she wanted. I just interviewed her on my podcast, and she, in her own way, has become an influencer, because of how she's gone about marketing her book.
Is she
And
the
she
one who's also
brought people in right from the beginning. Yeah, sorry.
is she the one who's also working in film? That recent
Yes,
episode? Yes, I listened to that one. See, I'm not just an interviewer. I'm
a
a
pretty face.
well, okay. So let's go back to this idea then that nonfiction and fiction are quite different in the marketing. What can fiction authors learn from nonfiction authors in their marketing, and other way around? What can nonfiction authors learn from the success of fiction authors?
That's a great question. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is nonfiction learning from fiction, and that is story, is the concept of story. Nonfiction authors are brilliant at, story, because their whole book is about story. Um, that is often missing for nonfiction. And I know for myself, I think that's one of the hardest things that I've, faced is the challenge of telling stories. I'm very good at the 5 tips to do this and the 10 ways to do that. Brilliant. But now it's all about story.
Hmm.
and you want the story about your company and the story about the book and the story about, you know, case studies. I think that's where nonfiction authors can help fiction authors. The other way round of nonfiction authors helping fiction authors is really in looking at the marketing. How can they market their book? How can they get over the fear and instead of standing behind the book, stand in front of the book and
Mm,
be willing to talk about it in different ways? I
yeah.
think that could be, but yeah, I have to look at that more deeply.
Well, I mean, something I would love my fiction authors to pick up from nonfiction authors is, and of course, everyone has imposter syndrome, as you said, but I think
Yeah,
in the nonfiction space, there is more of a willingness to embrace your expertise. You know, you've written a cookbook on small pizzas.
yeah,
You're kind of an expert on small pizzas, right? But
yeah.
I'll have a client who will write three murder mysteries, and they'll go, well, I'm not really an expert. You know, you've written three of them. Like, yes, you are. So, I mean, that's something I'd like to see is that confidence that comes from saying, hey, I know this topic better than most people. And it's not bragging to say that, it's just a fact. You've written a book on it.
Oh, I'm in awe of fiction authors being able to come up with a story. I just think it's such an incredible talent that I know that I would love to be able to do better. So,
And
yeah,
I'm sure they would all love to be able to market the way you do. There we go. There's that cross
there
pollination.
you go. There you go. We've answered the question.
Well,
Great.
Susan, obviously, folks have over 500 episodes of the podcast they can go and listen to learn all about you.
Absolutely.
What
Book
else can,
marketing mentors, bookmarketingmentors.com.
perfect. And what else can folks do to connect with you or reach out to you?
Okay, well, if they like what they've heard, Kevin, and they want to talk to me, I love to do what I call a discovery session, and I call it a brainstorming session. So if they go to bookmarketingbrainstorm.com, they can sign up on my calendar and get a 20-minute complimentary session where we talk about their book and, and it has to be nonfiction
That's what I was
because
about to say. We just talked about the importance of target market. So
yeah,
who
yeah, so it
who
really
is
has to
the right
be
person? Yeah,
nonfiction
is
because
it just nonfiction, or what's the best person that you're going to be able to help?
it would be a nonfiction author who has a book that appeals primarily to corporate audiences. That's usually a good one. Um, you know, memoir are harder to sell. Inspirational, motivational sometimes can be, more challenging. But if there's a way, an interest within the corporate environment, that's a good one. Doesn't mean that's the only way, but that's just one.
For sure. Great. Well, let's bring things back again to podcasting where you and I connect here. For me, one of the biggest influences was when I was decided I wanted to start a podcast. I read this article about what equipment to buy. It was like, here's the mixing board you need, here's the microphone to buy, here's the headphones. And it tried out all these different ones. It was a long article. And at the end, it then said, here's a $15 headset. Go buy this and do 50 episodes. And if you like it after 50 episodes, go buy the nice equipment.
Nice, good.
And I really appreciate that mentality of someone who's like in it for the long haul. You know, that you've done 500 episodes and you're like, let's do 500 more. I say this to clients sometimes. It doesn't create the best urgency from a marketing perspective, but people will be like, can I circle around with you next year? And I'm like, I'm not going anywhere. Like, this is my life's work. I'll be doing this podcast. I'll be coaching clients. And so I just always admire you. I'm on your mailing list. I do listen to the show, and just seeing the tenacity with which you show up on a weekly basis, year after year is like marvelous. So I just congratulations on
Thank you.
the work that you've done and that you continue to do.
Appreciate that.
And given how busy you are doing all of that, thank you so much for carving out some time to come back to the podcast. And
I love it. Let's leave it another 10 years.
you don't want to wait till 2036 for the
No,
next
no, I
episode?
don't know
Okay,
whether.
we'll do it before then.
Not sure where I'm going to be in 2036.
Who knows when any of us will be here? But
Exactly, exactly.
thank you for a great conversation.
My pleasure, Kevin, anytime. And I'm excited to interview you.
I'm looking forward to it. It's like when Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel would cross over. We're gonna do like a writing coach, book marketing mentors crossover here.
I love it. It'll be excellent. So thank you again. And thank you to your listeners. And if they want to get in touch with me, bookmarketingbrainstorm.com.
I'll put it on the screen here. I'll put it.
Yeah, that'll be
flashing
wonderful.
lights right down here for
Perfect.
And
Thank
of
you.
course, we'll have the show notes for you.
Excellent. Thank you. Take care.